With graph paper, I did not even begin to attempt to do them to scale. Let me see, I can't say which room I started off with, I don't remember. And just went through and decided I was going to try to do as much as I could, feeling that I felt eventually that there were places that I could plot out, such as where the girls were killed. I was not absolutely sure at that point when I started out doing the maps where the girls were killed, but I felt that it was somewhere back around the area where they lived. Suite number, what? They live at suite number 3.
When Jack is sitting typing at his typewriter and Wendy comes in and interrupts him while he's working.
Well, Room 237 really started, from a Facebook posting. My friend Tim Kirk came across this kind of mind-blowing new theory about what The Shining was really supposed to be about, and posted it on my wall, and the two of us spent some time just talking about it and talking about our long-lasting love of The Shining and Kubrick films in general. And a few years before, or maybe at that point it was a year or less, I had done a short that was sort of about people's memories of watching some TV as kids and these really striking memories that stuck with them, and sort of childhood phobias they had, actually, in this case of a TV logo. And I was looking to do something maybe kind of similar, but more ambitious. So me and Tim kept kind of batting it around and thought it might be interesting to see how much else we could find about The Shining and people who've spent a lot of time analyzing it and interpreting it and looking for hidden meanings and clues and symbols. And certainly that movie always seemed like it was full of them, and I had remembered I had a book in college about Kubrick in general, and in the Shining chapter there was like a half a page deciphering the numerology, and that had always struck with me and raised that gigantic question of how much of this could have been intentional. Was he really working on this insanely deep level where every item in the frame represents 100 other things? And once we sort of opened up the door and started to see how much stuff we could find, we were kind of astonished at just how wide a world there was of people writing very long, very passionate inquiries, into The Shining. And very quickly the idea expanded from what might have been a half-hour short covering the 3 ideas, if there were only 3, about what The Shining meant, into something that could have been 9 hours long and being updated every 6 months. Because the other sort of bizarre thing is, in the course of making the film, more and more and more writing and analyses and YouTube postings about The Shining started coming into existence. Like we were coming into it just as this wave was cresting. I think it was always intentional, from the first steps of developing the film, that the interviews would be audio only. And there's logistical reasons for that, and it's more inexpensive for me to mail somebody an audio recorder and talk to them via Skype than to fly around the country with a film crew. But I also thought there was something really exciting about having to work harder to create the images. That talking headshots and documentaries are usually my least favorite part of the production, and after you see what the person looks like, well, it's not terribly cinematic to keep cutting back and back and back to them. And since this movie was so much about the world of ideas and how The Shining and other films have kind of become this universe that we're all trapped in, I didn't want to keep coming back to people's offices or living rooms. I wanted this movie to take place in outer space or in ancient Rome, not in an apartment in Brooklyn or an office in Atlanta. I was thinking about fair use arguments, but when I was first making the film, it was such a tiny project. I was imagining it might play, at the Echo Park Film Center for 40 people and then have a live on YouTube cut up into 5 or 10 minute segments. I had seen other films that seemed like, good precedents for doing this type of work and getting it out. And once we started to build up some momentum and there was festival interest in things, we got a little more serious about dotting our I's and crossing our T's. And actually we managed to get through that process, pretty well. We had a great sort of legal clearance team, and I only had to make, a small handful of compromises, to get the movie signed off on. I see connections between our film and, some of those, and some of these new styles of film criticism. And certainly, something I saw that just blew my mind and I thought created an entire new genre were those 90-minute Star Wars prequel reviews, in which, through the voice of a fictitious, semi-unreliable character, he's doing an incredibly effective piece of criticism deconstruction, on a single feature film, as well as just giving us a pretty insightful look at film theory and film structure. And then with the 2 sequels to it, he was able to continue the arc of his fictitious character threaded through the entire epic. It just kind of blew my mind as the type of thing that couldn't have existed, 10, 20 years ago, both because the means of production would have been too expensive and there would be no venue for it. Siskel and Ebert, classic show, had to, put 3 or 4 interviews in a 22-minute set, but because YouTube, there's no end, there's no limit on how long your video can be, why not spend more time, do 90 minutes on one film? I know as we've been kind of, in a halfway facetious way, joking about what might be the follow-up, the idea of narrowing our focus instead of expanding it seems kind of intriguing. Like, if there were to be a sequel, I think we might want to just take the very last shot of The Shining, of the black and white photo, and do the entire thing on that. I mean, my take on The Shining, and, there were times when it, would sort of make the hairs in the back of my neck stand up. It's a lot simpler and down to earth than, a lot of the folks I talk to. I think I'm probably much more literal minded than most of my interviewees, and maybe a part of the impetus of the film was, I've heard the movie is about, Native Americans, and I heard that it's about these other things, but I'm having trouble seeing it. When I see the film, especially now that I have, a small son, I see it as a parable about balancing the responsibilities of your career and your family. And in my case, working on the film, I spent a ton of time. I was working in my home studio, just on my Mac, sitting at the typewriter in the middle of the night as my wife and son are elsewhere in the house, up the giant staircase, on the other side of the room, wondering if what I was writing was all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy over and over and over again, whether it was totally insane gibberish that no other human being would ever be interested in. But again and again and again, what we've been finding is our project to a small degree, but The Shining to an endless one, seems to be a machine that just creates these synchronicities and coincidences. Drawing these connections between the film and your own life and the world around you. When we played at Sundance, the theater and our hotel were both on Sidewinder Drive, which is the name of the road that goes up to the Overlook Hotel. And our screening happened in the midst of a driving blizzard. It's just insane.